Thank you. And first of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me. And I would like to focus on three issues in my introductory words. First, indeed, the Budapest Memorandum and what the Ukraine crisis now means in this context. Secondly, then, what about nuclear rhetoric, and indeed, in this sense, the position of nuclear arms in today's conversation about arms and arms control, and then what do we see as the options for a way forward? Now, first of all, indeed, the illegal annexation of Crimea was a breach of the Budapest Memorandum. And therefore, it's now an example, and in that sense, of course, a very bad example of how security assurances towards a state that is ready to give up its nuclear weapons do not hold at the end of the day. Now, that, of course, sends a very ominous message to everyone. And it's not without impact on other states around this world within the context of non-proliferation. And therefore, certainly from our point of view, and Germany as a country which actually adheres to the ultimate objective of a nuclear weapons-free world, so that was a heavy blow to us. And what do we draw from that? From our point of view, it means that we have to look even more seriously today at negative security assurances. Because certainly we don't want that, the breach of the Budapest Memorandum now sets in a cycle of proliferation. So therefore, this issue of negative security assurances is, for us, one of the issues to focus on. And therefore, we, at the moment, are discussing, could we strengthen negative security assurances? What are the ways to do that beyond the existing NPT framework? Of course, in that context, we would have liked the NPT review conference in May to also conclude with a final document. We couldn't achieve that. For us, that means that we have to strive even more for implementation of the action plan of 2010, because the NPT remains a key pillar of arms control in the field of nuclear weapons. Second issue, nuclear rhetoric in and around the Ukrainian crisis. Now, I think that none of us was used to nuclear rhetoric in the public sphere for the last 2 decades. We just didn't have it. And the reappearance of nuclear rhetoric and the thinking about nuclear weapons as an option within a conflict scenario certainly, rattled all of us and was a wake-up call. And so therefore, from our point of view, that President Putin mentioned, the possible, option of nuclear weapons in this context is very, very regrettable. Equally regrettable, and that's another issue that we might discuss, is, of course, a threat that nuclear weapons could be stationed, in positions where there are none at this particular point in time. Crimea. So these are all reasons of concern for us, and so therefore our view of nuclear weapons and the salience of nuclear weapons remains that they are a political tool, not a real, military kind of tool. But they are and continue to function, of course, as a deterrence. And it's in this context that I want to say that we support the humanitarian initiative. We want a weapon, we want a world without nuclear weapons, and we certainly don't want to see any time again the use of a nuclear weapon. And we are in the year of the 70th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But if we want to continue on this path towards this vision, we need a step-by-step approach that includes the nuclear weapons states, because we do not have these discussions about nuclear disarmament in a vacuum, and therefore the current security environment certainly doesn't make it easier. What are our options? How do we go about the future? Let me start by saying that, again, now looking at that from a perspective as Germany as a member of NATO, we don't want to see tit for tat. So we don't think that if there is rhetoric which we disagree with from the other side, we should then respond with similar rhetoric from our side. So therefore, the key statements of the alliance remain for us valid, even in this changed environment. And therefore, and they say that the nuclear forces of the alliance are the supreme guarantee of the security of the allies. Yes, that continues to hold. But the circumstances in which any use of nuclear weapons might have to be contemplated are extremely remote. And actually that, from our point of view, continues to be true. And therefore, in the Wales summit declaration, NATO recommitted to this vision of a world free of nuclear weapons. And that is what we would want to continue striving for. Now, after Ukraine, there is no business as usual at the same time. So while key principles remain, we can't simply go on as if nothing happened. And therefore, I think we have to look back into the 60s probably, and also keep in mind the gist of the Harmel report of 1967, which had two pillars, which is deterrence on the one side and détente on the other side. And these pillars are mutually reinforcing from our point of view. And also, we as a Western alliance need to find the right balance. And therefore, while we do collective defense, we also need a rules-based, an arms-controlled security environment in Europe, and we need to have a dialogue with the Russian Federation on the other side of this equation. Now, that's why we are fully behind the strengthening of deterrence and the readiness action plan, but at the same time, we want to go also for cooperative security in Europe. And of course, that's no easy task. It's not easy at this point in time to really talk about risk reduction, prevention of incidents, transparency, confidence-building measures. But that's what we have to do, and therefore we have to keep channels open to our Russian colleagues, and we also have to have military-to-military contacts. From our point of view, arms control is especially salient in times of tension and of possible confrontation. That is where you need the tools, inspections, prior information before we go into exercises, deconflicting, confidence building, red telephones. That's what you need in these times where we are now. And that is also why Germany, as incoming chair of the OSCE in 2016, will have a specific focus on the practical instruments in this field in the OSCE, such as modernization of the Vienna document, looking at open skies, discussing the role of conventional arms instruments after the Ukraine crisis, and also drawing lessons from their use during the Ukraine crisis. To sum up, we think that, yes, there is therefore a nuclear dimension in this sense to the Ukraine conflict, but of course it was, the conflict itself is led by conventional warfare and hybrid warfare. We think that we should hold fast to the goal of a global zero, continue to adhere to the NPT and fully implement the action plan, strengthen negative security assurances, and to end with a final call, there is an offer from President Obama to the Russian Federation, the Russian president, to go into another cycle of disarmament in the nuclear field, a follow-up to New START, and we would very much encourage to take a first step into that direction and to start seriously discussing a further round of nuclear disarmament. Thank you.